How to really mend knitting. Hi everyone, Norman here. Have you seen a video like this before? So there is this seemingly ingenious darning method you see all over the internet. You start by inserting horizontal loops with a tapestry needle. You weave that spare length of yarn back and forth and back and forth, always going underneath both legs of the edge stitch, making sure that you do not pull tight. In the next step, you can use a crochet hook and simply ladder back up. Then you pick up your tapestry needle one more time and graft one stitch by following the natural path of a row of knit stitches. You repeat this process for every single column of stitches of your hoe and can easily mend knitting in a super invisible way. Awesome, fabulous, video done. Or is it? Well, here's the truth. This technique looked awesome, and it simply does not work this way. Why? Because your hole does not look like that. This video and this technique was entirely staged. Your hole typically has frayed edges with tails dangling down on both sides. And if you do not secure these loose ends right away, a new and even bigger hole will greet you the next morning. What I didn't show you in those first seconds is how I secretly secured those loose tails on the wrong side with a tapestry needle where you couldn't see it. I also cheated by unraveling one more row to know exactly how long these loops need to be. And then I marked that spot with a pin. You probably didn't notice. The result was this perfectly square hole with perfectly stable edges where I could easily sew across. The hole you want to mend in your hand knitting typically doesn't look like this. So let me show you an alternative way to mend your sweaters or really just any other knitting project with the hole in a reasonable, invisible and very secure way. So we have this unsightly, wonky little hole here. In the very first step, you need to secure the damage. So before you even go hunting for yarn in the same color, things like that, you need to secure the damage so it doesn't unravel any further. First of all, we have this runaway stitch here below, and you can easily secure these with a stitch marker like this one. If you don't have these stitch markers, a safety pin, things like that also work. Just something to secure this. Then carefully take a look at the damage here towards the top and find the first, or rather the last intact row here above. So here, see, these are loose ends. And this row here seems to be intact. And then use a very fine knitting needle like this one here. We are not actually going to knit with it. It's just to secure these stitches, and always pick up here the right leg. So here you have this V of the knit stitches, and you always just pick up the right leg of these stitches. Make sure that you cover the full damaged area, and this will prevent your knitting from unravel, further towards the top. If you don't have a spare knitting needle like this, you can also use a tapestry needle and do the same with a spare length of yarn. So I'm just doing this here, one row above. And then you can easily do the exact same with a bit of yarn. Do whatever you prefer. For me, this is faster. This here is a little bit more flexible and less stiff, so it could be the better option for you. Next, you do the exact same thing here at the bottom. So find the last intact row. So here we have one strand here. This is the last strand. This is fully intact, and if you follow that strand, this is our last row here. This here is the last row that is fully intact. However, I want you to move down one row, and you will see why in a second. But do the exact same thing here, one row below. Now here there is this little gap here, and we can fix this as we move along. So pick up your crochet hook, insert it here right into that stitch, and then always here, see, there are these strands here connecting the stitches, and you just pull your crochet hook or the strand you through with your crochet hook all the way up, and then you can secure that row as well. See, we are one row below, and this is as intended. So we go all the way to this side, and now we more or less secured our damage. Now here comes the slightly tricky part. So see all these tails here? All these tails need to be woven in later on, because if you leave it like this and fix the hole and you sew over it, then these stitches here, because there's just this tiny little stop here and you can't secure this, and this would unravel right away. So in the very, very first step, you actually need to unravel your hole a little bit further. So the tail should be, well, at least that long, because you need to weave things in, and you need to cover a couple of stitches for it to be secure. So your tails need to be at least this long. So you actually need to unravel this hole here a tiny little bit further, so you end up with long enough tails, and then you just stop at a point where you get perfectly square edges. So here, this is a stitch here, and you just stop when you feel this is long enough. So that's here what I'm doing. I'm just unraveling it here until this point, all the way around. See? Then here on the wrong side, you also need to secure these tails. So any way you like. So you could group them together, and then you simply use a little pin, go right through the yarn. Well, maybe like so. First through a couple of stitches, then through the yarn, and then again through the fabric, and secure it like this. You could also use a little bit of tape here and just tape them to your fabric, whatever works for you. We are going to weave them in later on. For now, we just need to secure them. So now the little hole here looks a lot more manageable, and there still remains this one additional row here where we have these little loops here, and you actually need to unravel them, because the knitting needle or your spare yarn is still here attached below. It won't unravel. This, however, will tell us exactly how much yarn we need for each row. That's something you wouldn't know otherwise, but here like this, you know exactly how much yarn you need for this row. And it's super, super easy to fix this. But this is a very important thing to know. Next, we can start fixing the damage here and mending this hole. I'm going to do this using yarn in a nice contrasting color. You probably want to use something or the same yarn. If you don't have the same yarn, using a contrasting color is actually not the worst choice. So this row here is the one we don't need to fix. We still have an intact yarn here. So the first row we need to fix is this row here. And I want you to start here 3 or 4 stitches in. So this is the row we need to fix. So go below these 2 stitches and pull your yarn all the way through. Leave a short tail, but you don't need all that much. Then go below these 2 stitches here and pull through. So we are actually just following the natural course of these knit stitches here, which means we need to go here above and so on. Now your tail is going to be rather long, so it will take some time, but go slowly. So we are doing duplicate stitches here, and this is kind of reinforcing the damaged area towards the sides. If you don't do this, your hole might unravel any time. Okay, so long tail, always be aware that if you do this in the same color, it's going to be a lot less noticeable. When you're here right at the edge, you go through here this last stitch one more time. So your tail exits right through your last intact and perfectly sound stitch. Make sure that you don't pull too tightly on this tail here so your fabric puckers. Over here on this side you do the exact same thing. So this is here our last intact stitch, and you go in here from below. Careful that you don't mess things up. And then here below this stitch here, go below. So you just follow the natural course of your stitches. And now we can use our little trick here. So this is our one intact row, and it tells us exactly how much yarn we need to, well, knit or fix one row. So simply pull on the tail here until both loops here are the exact same, or around about the exact same length. I would actually err a little bit on the looser side. If your hole is a little bit looser than the rest of the fabric, it doesn't matter. If it's tighter, it's gonna pucker. And then you reinforce this side of the hole as well by doing duplicate stitch. So careful here for the very first stitches so that you don't accidentally tighten this loop here up here. That's not what you want, of course, but you just follow the natural course of these stitches for a couple, 2, 3, 4 stitches. It kind of depends on the fiber you're working with. So here, this is cotton yarn. This actually means I would have to do this for quite a couple of more stitches, because cotton doesn't felt, it's super slippery, but if it's wool, then you will be fine. And then you need to move up one row. So I am going here all the way around to the back side. So I'm just doing half a stitch here. And then here up above, I go through this stitch here, and then we can continue doing duplicate stitches here in the other direction. It's really very, very simple. You always go here below these 2 legs here. So here, and then up above here below these 2 legs. So it's really no rocket science, very easy, and you can actually use the same process to embroider knitting. Make sure that you kind of pull, well, not tight, it shouldn't be tight, but you want to kind of emulate the same tension your knitting, the rest of your knitting has. So here, go below. If you pierce through, or rather, I would try as best as possible to pierce a little bit through the strands here as you do this, because this will further reinforce the damage. And then here, out through this stitch, out through this stitch. So we fixed this side here, and then we can already bridge the gap here over to this side. So here is, here is the stitch we need to go in through here. There we go. See this? Here is where we need to go in. Of course, leave a loop here, and then here below these two edge stitches. And then one more time, you make sure that these loops here are all the same length. So maybe a little bit tighter, like so. So now we have these strands here between, and later on we can use them to ladder back up. So up in here for the very last stitch, we are going through the edge stitch just like before. But then you won't continue anymore. To close the gap here at the top, we will need to graft stitches, and for that we will use the tapestry needle. And this is the result. So we have these 4 little strands here that are roughly all the same length here. Then we have here the reinforcing stitches over on both sides. Now these duplicate stitches will add bulkiness to your fabric, and it will be slightly visible. I feel, you know, you have a hole, there's no way to prevent it. If you skip this, I mean, in the introduction I showed you that you can just go around the edge stitches. However, these little strands here on the wrong side, they are so short that when you weave them in, they are never gonna be safe. As an alternative, you could unravel even further, so you get way longer tails, and then weave this in, and even then I still believe it wouldn't be safe. You need to go in both directions. So this little bit of bulkiness on either side is something you probably have to live with. Okay, so this is where the magic happens. My tapestry needle is up in here, still attached to the tail. Now I pick up my crochet hook, and I can carefully pick up that first stitch and simply ladder back up. Make sure that you pick up the strands in the right order and that you don't accidentally skip one. So this one here is the next, this one here. This first row will still be, as you can see, will still be somewhat loose. We are going to fix this with the second row. For now, we'll leave it there. Then you pick up your tapestry needle, and I go through it from behind, like so, from behind, and then up in here. There are these 2 stitches here, and I go in from underneath both legs here, just the way you did all the time. And then you go out through this stitch here, coming in from the front. And now you already fixed your first row. It's going to look a little bit on the wonky side. However, if you pull, if you pull on these tails, and that's actually what you need to do, things are actually going to look a lot better already. See? Okay, so time to repeat this process, and I'm going to pick up my second loop here. And again, I simply ladder back up, If you tension these loops a little bit, your chain looks a little bit better. And then you repeat the same process. Go in from behind. And then here, underneath the two legs, like so. And then out through the front. Then again, tidy up by tightening these stitches. Just pull on them and like so. And things are starting to look much better. Last row, this is typically the most satisfying one as you are finally closing the gap for good. One more time. In from behind, below the two legs, out through the front. And then you can continue grafting here over on this side here, so like so. And then you can pull that tail through to the wrong side. And over here, this tail, pull it through towards the wrong side as well. If you notice that your stitches are still looking a little bit unbalanced and one is bigger than the other, then you can simply use a spare knitting needle and carry over the excess over to the sides and distribute all that slack evenly among the adjacent stitches. So you can always do that. Just every single little stitch gets a little bit of that slack, and then tighten up and things will look quite lovely. Now here on the wrong side there are still all these little tails here we need to weave in, and you need to weave them in this direction, because you might have noticed that here you have these little steps that are kind of rolling in, and that's because of course the tails right now are pulling in this direction instead of the natural direction, which would be this side. So you need to weave them in, and I already wove in one here, so let's do the second together. These tails will be a little bit too short to thread on a tapestry needle and then do the sewing, so you need to do it the other way around. You need to sew first and then thread the remaining tail on a tapestry needle. So see this bump here, and this tail needs to go through this bump here. Then this tail needs to go through this, and so on. So we are going to go through this bump here, and then see I am piercing right through these bumps here over on this side. And then let's see if I can do this on camera, right? So far away and a little bit too slippery. Then you see it work. Then you can pull the tail through here. And now I need some grippers here because it's very, very warm and the needle is slippery. So, like so. And then let things ease up and like so. And you need to do the same thing for all other tails as well. So this tail here needs to go below this bump, and then we can just weave it in diagonally. And you need to do this exact same process here for all your tails, like so. Always massage, after every tail you wove in, you massage the tails in, and you can see that this step here is slowly disappearing. Once you wove in all these tails, I know it takes ages, it's nothing knitters really enjoy doing, but you have to do it. Once you did this, I would resist the urge to trim away these stubs. Leave them for now, let things felt over, because otherwise the next time you stretch your fabric, these ends will come undone even further, and that's exactly not what you want. Instead, after washing your piece once or twice, like you're gonna wash it anyway at one point, then you can trim off whatever is still peeking out, because then things will have felted over. And of course we need to appreciate the result. Of course this is noticeable because I used a contrasting yarn in a contrasting color, but I do feel it's quite neat. It's quite neat. Of course, you are creating a portion in your fabric that is thicker than the rest, so it will always be, well, slightly noticeable. There is no way to avoid this because you need to weave in all those tails. There is no way around that. You need to do this. Now, I did the duplicate stitches here over on these sides. If you remember the beginning of this video where I showed you a different technique, I didn't do this. So this portion of the fabric is going to be a little bit more flexible. It's going to be a little bit more flexible. However, the security of this fix rests on the length of these tails and how well you will be able to weave them in. On top of that, here, see this column of stitches and this column of stitches, it's kind of, well, slanting in towards the side. Here with this technique, the effect is less pronounced, so this would be my choice. However, if you don't want to do the duplicate stitches, then don't, and do it the way I showed you at the beginning of the video. Of course, first you actually need to create this square hole to get started. And there you have it, you successfully fixed that hole. Comment below if you want me to show you even more ways to mend knitting. This was after all just one application. There's also sock heels, pulled out stitches, dropped stitches, you know, seams coming undone, things like that. Comment below if you're interested, and as always, happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.